On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk about SASE security, zero trust, and flying to the moon with Alexa.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 475 for January 7, 2022. In Zero, we trust.
This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Progress. Progress has the technology you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, network, and processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit. And by Plextrack, the purple teaming platform. Save time and increase productivity with the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management product designed to support proactive security strategy from assessment through remediation. Visit plextrack.com/twit to claim your free month. And by IT Pro TV. Are you looking to break into the world of IT? Get the introduction you need with IT Pro TV. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise for an additional 30% off all consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code Enterprise30 at checkout.
Welcome to TWiET, This Week in Enterprise Tech, your weekly guide to everything that is important in the world of enterprise technology. I'm Curt Franklin, Senior Analyst at Omdia, and I'm your Lou Maresca replacement for this week. I am not replacing him alone, though. You know, Lou is the kind of guy where it really takes multiple people to replace him, so we've got a full roster of co-hosts today, starting with the geek formerly in Paradise, now just down the street, Brian Chee, who is net architect at Sky Fiber and thoroughly retired lab manager from the University of Hawaii. Brian, how are things down on the other end of the block?
It's truly wonderful, and I'm still loving my solar system. In fact, yesterday we finally got my power walls installed. So now, if I generate excess energy during the day, it gets it stored, and I don't have to draw from the utility at night, which ought to be really cool like that.
I truly love the idea of not drawing from the utility. You know, we installed solar on our house, and we're just starting to get our first bills, and boy, howdy, do I like the low numbers on those things. Well, speaking of low numbers, I think that describes the temperature where our other co-host is. Mr. Oliver Rist, executive editor at PC Mag. Oliver, you're not in Florida. How are things wherever northerly climate you're hailing from?
Well, I hail from the northern climate of Connecticut, where currently we are under a foot of wonderful white snow, which would be not so bad if my snowblower decided to work. But since it copped out on me, I'm basically opening up a Bengay subscription. So that's where I am.
Well, it sounds like you are, I would say, heading in the right direction, but that seems wrong too. I just we'll be trying to think warm thoughts in your general direction. Well, we're going to start thinking those warm thoughts while we do the blips. And for the first one, we're going to ask Alexa to fly us to the moon. You know, the original inspiration for Amazon's ubiquitous all-hearing internet sage was the talking computer on the Starship Enterprise, you know, the one that helped Captain Curt navigate the cosmos on Star Trek. Now, Alexa may be going to space in reality. Lockheed Martin, which is building the Orion spacecraft that NASA hopes will fly astronauts to the moon within a couple of years, is partnering with Amazon to put Alexa in the capsule. The device would give astronauts real-time information on telemetry, the health of the spacecraft, and its speed. The device would give astronauts real-time information, and in addition, the Orion spacecraft will be outfitted with screens that display WebEx, you know, the Cisco-based system for collaboration. Taken together, the package, which is known as Callisto, will help translate different languages so astronauts from all over the world could communicate while in space. It would also help controllers on the ground share information over a screen the same way company offices communicate remotely. The onboard space Alexa won't be connected to the internet all the time, but instead will connect directly to Orion's computer and its onboard cloud, which will allow it to monitor the health of the spacecraft. Still, it can send queries back to Earth and connect with the cloud to retrieve all kinds of information, like news that might help astronauts feel a little less lonely way up there in space. The system is slated to launch on NASA's Artemis 1 mission, which is now scheduled for sometime in March or probably later. And that will send the Orion spacecraft into orbit around the moon. While that flight is not scheduled to have astronauts on board, engineers will test Callisto by monitoring it on the ground, as well as by keeping tabs on it with cameras inside the spacecraft. Wonder how Alexa will feel having someone watch it for a change.
So I had an email from one of my ex-students from the University of Hawaii, and he labeled it as a note from the DNS Cop. So DNSSEC has been around for almost 20 years. It's a protocol update to the traditional DNS that has no security features. DNSSEC allowing DNS servers to authenticate one each other, thus preventing spoofing attacks such as cache poisoning, but it offers no data privacy. Encrypted DNS is a newer set of standards, including DNS over TLS, DOT, and DNS over HTTPS, DOH. Encrypted DNS offers data privacy for the last mile delivery between the DNS client and the DNS server. Unlike DNSSEC, encrypted DNS keeps the messages private but offers no authentication. However, neither of these technologies, even when combined, deal with the real issue, that there are a lot of malicious domain names hosting malicious content on the internet. There's another technology that could enhance DNS security known as Response Policy Zone, abbreviated RPZ. This is a set of policy rules you can synchronize from another source or manually configure on the DNS servers to override answers for certain domains. For example, the client may ask to resolve the malicious name phishing.attackme.com. Rather than returning the IP address, the DNS server with RPZ will return NX domain. In parentheses, it says, this name does not exist, close parentheses, preventing the client from ever accessing that domain name. So Josh Kua, a.k.a. the DNS Cop and one of my ex-students, thank you very much for correcting me, and I needed to share it with the TWiET Riot.
Well, in keeping with our security theme, apparently Google Docs comments is now being weaponized as a phishing attack. So some researchers discovered that the Google Docs commenting feature is being used to send seemingly legitimate emails that are convincing targets to click on malicious links. The research was done by Avanan Research Group, who apparently say that this is not the first time that they've seen this. Earlier this year, they observed attackers sending links to Google Docs files that contained a malicious download, and the victims who downloaded the file were tricked into entering their login credentials. The latest threat uses a different method, which was documented in 2020. Starting in December, Avanan saw the attackers using the Google Docs commenting feature in a phishing campaign that primarily, but not exclusively, hit at Outlook users. Apparently, it hit at least 500 inboxes across 30 tenants and more than 100 unique Gmail accounts. So watch out.
Speaking of watching out, new Mac malware samples are underscoring the point that no one's safe anymore. For the 6th year in a row, security researcher Patrick Wardle has released a list of all the new Mac malware threats that emerged over the course of a year. A handful of malware samples that emerged in 2021 demonstrate once again that Apple's technologies, while less prone to attack and compromise in Windows systems, are absolutely not invulnerable. Wardle's list is comprised of 8 new malware samples that surfaced in 2021 in target Mac OS. Among them are ElectroRat, a cross-platform remote access Trojan that emerged in January, Silver Sparrow, a malware tool specifically targeted at Apple's M1 chip launched last year, Xloader, a cross-platform password stealer, and OSX.cdds, or MacMa, a Mac OS implant likely developed by a nation-state actor. All of this is important because a survey of 300 IT professionals commissioned by mobile device management vendor Kanji last year showed that Apple device use has grown at 76% of organizations over the past 2 years. 53% of those in the survey reported that requests from Apple devices have grown at their organization over the same time period. Willie Leichter, CMO at Logic Hub, says the biggest Mac malware threats of last year fell under a handful of categories: crypto miners like ElectroRat and OSA Miner, adware loaders like Silver Sparrow, information stealers like Xloader, and MacMa, and cross-platform Trojans like Wild Pressure. There's still a lingering misperception that Macs are inherently more secure than Windows systems because of the raw numbers of attacks, Leichter says. That sentiment is largely a reflection of the current market share, where Windows still dominates. He says Macs do have some security advantages, but these are becoming less significant because of 2 trends. Malware is increasingly targeting browser plugins, not the underlying OS, he said. And additionally, malware developers are increasingly creating cross-platform applications that are independent of the operating system. The trend requires organizations to pay closer attention to the Mac OS environment. While many security organizations have in the past seen Mac OS and iOS as safe enough with existing controls, attackers are now finding these devices lucrative targets. This means that security teams need to start bringing their technical understanding of these platforms on par with other platforms so they can identify malicious behaviors and attacks. Well, that's it for the blips. We've got some exciting bites and an even more exciting conversation coming up. But before we take steps in those directions, we need to hear from Lou with a word from one of our valuable sponsors.
Well, thank you, guys. Happy New Year to everyone. I'll get you back to your enterprise news in just a moment. But first, I have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Progress. Some of my favorite development tools are Progress tools. I've been using them for years. In fact, Fiddler is my favorite tool that's out there. Now, Progress is a fantastic company. They've been enabling enterprise experiences for decades and has assembled the technologies that will empower businesses to thrive in a post-COVID world. Now, most companies don't have the resources to invest in technology as digital Goliaths. They need to use technology to create differentiation with a smaller investment. Now, they can achieve this by turning to Progress as their trusted provider. Now, with Progress, any organization can achieve the level of differentiation that is critical in today's business environment. Whether you're an IT professional concerned about networking and infrastructure, security and compliance, or enabling a web and digital experience, Progress has a solution for you. Now listen to some of these solutions. MoveIt Managed File Transfer. Now it provides control, security, and visibility over all file transfer activities. So transferring confidential data through insecure channels opens up your organization to liabilities. Now with Managed File Transfer Solution, you can gain insight into who has access to your files, if the file was accessed, and when. Now, WhatsUp Gold Network Monitoring allows you to monitor networks, applications, and devices both in the cloud and on premises. Now, Kemp LoadMaster Load Balancer is a next-generation load balancing and application delivery solution for private, public, and hybrid cloud. And Flowmon Network Intelligence is a network performance monitoring and network detection and response solution. And the Sitefinity digital experience platform enables you to build digital experiences across channels that improve business agility and foster personal relationships with visitors. Progress has the technology you need to secure, analyze, and integrate your applications, network, and processes. Find out more and download a free trial at progress.com/twit. Don't miss out. Visit progress.com/twit for your very own Progress swag bag. And we thank Progress for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Back to you guys.
Appreciate that. We'll be hearing more from from Lou later on in the show. But now we need to move into the bites and talk about a couple of acronyms, a couple of terms that are big in enterprise security these days, but probably need to be thought of as foundations and not goals. You know, we need to consolidate digital identity management before we leap into zero trust. Now, zero trust, make no mistake, is probably the hottest term in enterprise security these days. Zero trust is underlying all kinds of implementations that we're seeing around the world, but there are a bunch of ways that people are going about zero trust. Now, why is everyone all excited about this? Enterprise cloud computing and the rise of remote working are two of the reasons. You're allowing employees tremendous access to enterprise data and services from a much wider range of locations than ever before. And a lot of companies see zero trust as being the key to making that happen in a secure way. Problem is, zero trust is a strategy. Zero trust is a technique. It is not a magic bullet or a full force field that protects from everything by itself. Building zero trust requires organizations to identify the protect surface, which surrounds their most important data, assets, applications, and services, and the like, and then build a micro perimeter around the protect surface so that users re-authenticate whenever they cross it. To do that, they have to use IAM. That's identity and access management. And it is, in most ways that matter, the foundation, the cornerstone of zero trust architecture. The thing that makes that statement, which seems fairly simple on its face, complicated, is that organizations have a combination of legacy systems, digital identity structures, and tools for provisioning, for deprovisioning, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, smart card-enabled access, and more. And in order to make sense of all this, and frankly, in order to make it work in a cohesive way that is effective, the enterprise has to make sense of all of these techniques, all of these technologies, and build them into a cohesive whole. Now, the reason that's important is that fragmented digital identity can, by itself, pose a security risk. Because every one of those digital identities or digital identity fragments poses an additional point at which an attacker, a threat actor, can bring their forces to bear on the perimeter and seek access to the system. Within many organizations, the sheer number of digital identities associated with employees has become a threat. You know, in the same way that we passed the point 25 years ago at which one person equaled one IP address, we have left behind the day when one person equaled one identity. And in so many cases, users have different identities for every piece of equipment they use, every operating system they use, often every application they use, and we haven't even started to talk about cloud services and the like. You know, we've seen this actually in operation. Think about Colonial Pipeline in 2021. They breached, the attackers breached the organization systems via an unused VPN account, an employee VPN account that wasn't in use but was still active. In addition to that, the employee had used the same password multiple times. Remember password reuse? And thanks to a leak that happened somewhere else, that password was part of a batch that was for sale on the dark web. So this is something where zero trust is, without question, a critical technique, a critical set of technologies for modern cloud-based or hybrid-based enterprise security. But before an enterprise just begins throwing money in the direction of zero trust, they have to make sure that the foundation pieces have been laid so that it can be a successful deployment and a successful technique. So, Brian, I want to talk to you. You know, I realize that you have been part of all kinds of identity and access management deployments. Do you think we're off base here? I mean, is zero trust a magic set of words that can simply be sprinkled like pixie dust over a network and have perfect security, or is there foundation work that needs to happen?
Oh, I think there's going to be a lot of foundation work. The reality is I've been hearing, shall we say, different titles being given to different goals that all really come down to zero trust. So zero trust, being called many, many different names, has been around throughout my entire career. Heck, some sort of zero trust description actually even showed up when I was working on IBM mainframes using CICS. There's still a lot of people alluding to, well, this is something we need to do because users don't like having to keep track of like 30 or 40 passwords. And they hated using complex passwords. So even back in the mainframe days, this whole issue raised its ugly head. Well, we're going to talk about it more a little later in the show, but Oliver and I were actually involved with an identity management system comparison review back in 2004, 2005. And realistically, from my point of view, you know, in the cheap seats, IAM and IDM really aren't that different. So identity and access management, I feel, if I you know, just taking a wild swing at it, is that IAM refers more to identity and access management in a hybrid world or across multiple clouds, whereas IDM, identity management, was more single system. There was no real big conversation about hybrid anything in those days because the cloud didn't quite exist outside of your enterprise. But anyway, it is something that has to get done. Humans don't like having to keep track of lots and lots of logins and lots of passwords. And that's why people get lazy and you start getting Post-it notes with passwords on it. You know, right down to it was a plot bunny out of some of the really early hacker movies like War Games. Anyway, things have to change. We're not there yet. Zero trust has been this nebulous goal that we haven't reached yet. I think things like SASE are strictly a milestone. It is not the end goal. The end goal is zero trust. SASE is just a stepping stone along the way.
You know, that's an interesting point, and we are seeing vendors use these terms beside one another and often as parts of the same sort of solution. Some of them do treat it, as you say, as an evolutionary step. Some of them say it's part. Some of them are using them as two pieces of the same solution. It's frustrating I spend a lot of time around the industry looking at what companies are doing, and it's frustrating trying to keep up with precisely how the terms are used. Now, Oliver, I'm coming to you because you see a lot of products as well, and I've got to ask whether you're seeing any kind of standardization, either in terms of the technology. I mean, are there standards efforts out there to make one work with another, or even in terms of the language that the companies are using to talk about what they're trying to sell to the enterprise?
Well, I get to be a little curmudgeon-y here. So yeah, language always changes on a dime. The reality, not so much. So I know you mentioned a survey when you were talking earlier, but I had a different one come across my desk from an outfit called Dimensional Research. So same topic, zero trust. By the way, they said Forrester invented that term. I never heard that, but anyway, they claimed that like 70-something% of IT pros finally even understand what zero trust means, but only 21% of those said that their organizations actually understood it, which is a problem because when you have something like zero trust, like Brian said, it's a framework. It's a set of guidelines. It's not a silver bullet. There's technologies that are associated with it, but it's not a technology unto itself. And when you're an IT pro, yes, if you're a security-oriented, enterprise guy, that's your only job, fine. But if you're like, that's my background as general IT pro, there's a lot of stuff happening that I have to take care of. An entire overhaul of your network's security, according to zero trust guidelines, is overwhelming. It's not just confusing, it is overwhelming. So yeah, Brian and I have looked at the IDM products since 2005. I started looking at that as soon as I got the PC Mag back in 2015. We've done, I think, 3 of those now. We just did one, the latest one back in December. So yeah, all of them are now saying that they're IDM and IAM, or they're IAM only now. But really, they all do the same thing. The only standards that I can see between any of them is still, to this day, LDAP and SAML. That's it, right? They don't, other than like black box scripting integrations with very specific things. The only ones that really cross every single product are those two, which, okay, great, but that's a lot of work for a general IT pro when you also tacked on the fact that Zero Trust wants you to look at EDR. It wants you to look at NAP. It wants you to look, or NAC. It wants you to look at DLP. It wants you to look at, everything from the endpoint out, from the service back in. So it's a great suggestion. Yes, we do have to change, but it's not, it's not an overnight thing. I mean, we've been hearing about Zero Trust for 3 years now, I think, or at least I have. 14% of people said that they've actually started it, according to that survey, which, when you read it at first sounds just pathetic. But then when you really dig into what zero trust means, A to Z, yeah, that's totally understandable. This is a massive undertaking, and most organizations will not back you as the IT guy since they don't really know what you're talking about. So I think if we have to overcome anything, it's maybe breaking it into bite-sized chunks, finding a way to educate your business on what it is and how it's going to happen, maybe helping people come up with a zero trust plan that actually works before they have to jump into it, something to get more than just the CISO or the IT pro security guy behind the effort. That would be my 2 cents.
Well, Oliver, you bring up several really good points, and one of them that I want to toss a question to both my co-hosts on. We have listeners here at TWiET from organizations of all different sizes, ranging from fairly small companies right up to the largest of the Global 1000 and governmental organizations. As we're talking about the complexity of something like zero trust, right now, is it a strategy only for those very, very large organizations that have the expertise on board to really tackle all this complexity? And will it ever be something that is realistic for smaller organizations to provide the kind of security that, frankly, they need just as much as the large organizations do? Brian, let me go to you.
I'm gonna jump in on that. I say it needs to be all the way down to the individual consumer. Zero trust, I think, is a lofty goal, and it needs to happen. I personally think it's going to be something along the lines of what I've seen in science fiction. Maybe you have a pencil that you keep in your pocket or something that's easy to carry around. You stick it into some sort of holder and you authenticate with your thumb or something like that. And as you proceed from site to site or from service to service, the dongle of some sort starts authenticating for you. It's your proxy. So you authenticate once, something you have, MFA, biometrics, something like that, and it allows you to go through. I see a day, this is just me pontificating and using a crystal ball, that I should be able to have a dongle that I can use for my cryptocurrency, I can use for all kinds of different currencies. I want it to be instead of my credit cards, and I want it to also be used for getting access to my system resources on the internet, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on premise, and so forth. Anyway, and there's a lot of things that need to change, a lot of things that need to go there. I know it's starting to get pushed down into the smaller organizations. As much as I chew on Cisco Meraki about their devices being so slow, there's actually a pretty good reason why they're slow. And there's a lot of things happening in the background. The Cisco Meraki stuff, even in a small organization, is implementing a beginning to SASE and a beginning to move you towards zero trust. And while this is certainly not an endorsement, it is a pat on the back saying, okay, you're moving smaller organizations towards a goal. And I think that's a good thing. So let's go see if Oliver got off the phone and see if we have. Ollie?
I'm off the phone. Sorry about that.
Oliver, let me ask you, have you seen any products or services starting to come across your desk that look like they're moving in the direction of something that smaller organizations might be able to take advantage of for zero trust or SASE or IAM or any of this?
Nope. They all say that they support. I mean, everyone says, yes, this is, we built it with zero trust in mind. Zero trust is a goal. Zero trust is this. Zero trust is that. However, it still is their small part of zero trust. And like I just said, zero trust is this massive sphere of strategy and technologies. And if you're an enterprise and you have experts who manage tons of endpoints and have to secure them, that guy will know what he's doing. And if you have the same organization, they have, petabytes of data, then they'll have a data protection guy who can handle his part of that, et cetera, et cetera. If you're medium-sized or smaller, you have a quote IT staff, unquote, and they have a series of tools, and it's up to them how they put it together and how they make it work. And that's all black box scripting. That's all black box, individual, highly customized, and very difficult and time-consuming to do. There is no all-in-one solution that I've seen so far that will take a small business or even a medium-sized business and say, yes, drop this on top of whatever you have, and you'll have 50% of zero trust or 70% of zero trust. That does not exist. And if it were to exist, it would probably come from some huge vendor, probably like Microsoft would have the first one, right? Because they own so many pieces of it. It makes sense for them to have the underlying architecture, I suppose, and they'll just drop a front end set of tools on that. But then they'll get in trouble for doing that, and third-party vendors will have to plug in somehow. It's still going to be this confusing morass. So I don't think the problem is tools. I think the problem is expertise. This stuff is too complicated for even an average IT pro to really make a big dent in. You're going to need experts. So it's less about, I guess, have I seen tools, which I haven't. But even once I see tools, are they accessible tools? That's what I would actually be looking for. It's not just a big set of toolkits. Can I use them, and can I use them easily without spending a year reading docs?
That's interesting, and it's a good thing you point out that having technology available is one thing, and that must happen, but having it technology that can be used by organizations of all different sizes and by professionals of varying levels of expertise is even more critical. Well, speaking of criticality, I think it's critical that we leave this bite behind and get ready for the next bite. But before we go on to our next bite, we're going to hear from Lou once again and another great TWiET sponsor.
Well, thank you, guys. I will get you back to your Enterprise and IT news in just a moment. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's PlexTrack. Now, PlexTrack is the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management platform that empowers teams to win the right security battles. Now, what if you could streamline the communication across the entire security department so that every team member could do their job more efficiently? From simplified data aggregation and reporting to integrated ticketing for remediation to analytics and visualizations for board reporting, PlexTrack touches every aspect of the security management workflow. Now, gain a real-time view of your security posture by bringing all of your data sources together into one powerful platform where you can triage scanner results, generate powerful analytics and visualizations, assign remediation tasks, attest to your posture, and track progress over time. Now, as a satisfied PlexTrack client put it, we see PlexTrack as a part of our strategy to move quicker and be proactive. Now we have real-time view of what we need to focus on, and I have an easy way of showing senior leadership. PlexTrack serves every aspect of the enterprise security team program with features designed to improve workflow, collaboration, and communication for each role, including red team data aggregation. They can import data from all of your automated vulnerability scanners and tools, triage and report results in half the time. The blue team has remediation. They can assign remediation tasks right on the platform or through simple integrations with the ticketing tools your team already uses and track progress over time. You also have continuous purple team assessment, begin purple teaming, or power up your current strategies with Runbooks, the best in industry tool for test plan execution. PlexTrack improves the entire security engagement lifecycle by making it easy to generate security reports, deliver them securely, and track the issues to completion straight from the platform. Book a demo today. Try PlexTrack free for 1 month and see how it can change your life as a security professional. Simply go to plextrack.com/twit and claim your free month. That's plextrack.com/TWiT. And we thank PlexTrack for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Back to you guys.
Well, it's great to be back. And now we have one of those special things that we do every now and again here on TWiET, a co-host roundtable. We have 3 hosts who have been around for a while in the industry and a great topic. To introduce that topic, I'm going to toss to Brian. Brian, this is one that's near and dear to your heart. Why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about?
Actually, what I want to start off with is we didn't do the second bite because it's starting to get late in the show and we want to have enough time for the roundtable. But there is an article that came out of Dark Reading basically saying nearly 50% of people will abandon sites prohibiting password reuse, which I think is slap your wrist or slap you on the back of the head. That's really, really bad. Basically, it is a big survey, and a lot of people still want to keep using the same password. Maybe they've finally gone to a complex password that they can remember. They just want to keep using it over and over and over again. Folks, this is one of those things where you've got to stop doing this. As long as we still have passwords, using passwords that can be brute forced, that's just bad juju. And using passwords over and over and over again is, that's just asking for problems. Anyway, that's enough. We're going to be up on that high horse forever. Reusing passwords, simple passwords. As long as we're still using password, you've got to stop reusing passwords. You've got to, one of my big suggestions is everybody's got at least one favorite song. You know, take the first letter of, say, the first 15, 20 words in the song. Use that as your password. You know, use something that a dictionary, password cracker can't crack or can't crack easily. Anyway, so that's it on that horse. What we're going to talk about in this roundtable is SASE is one of those big, super giant buzzwords that everybody in the industry, every journalist in tech is talking about. It's the hot buzzword. But I'm kind of, agreeing with a lot of people that that's a great goal, but realistically, the real goal is zero trust. We want to be able to have a way so that we're re-authenticating every time we cross a border of some sort, every time we change between machines. We want to have the ability to not give the bad guys an easy way in. Because remember, if we're talking about something along the lines of single sign-on, what does that really mean? That means all the bad guys have to do is guess one password and they've got the keys to the kingdom. Whereas zero trust means that one password just opens a vault of some sort. And that every time you cross a border, it's at least exchanging an encrypted proxy. And that's kind of the direction we're going. So we're calling this SASE, the road to zero trust. And there's a lot of things that are happening, and I'm going to toss it back to Curt only because the enterprise world, the C-suite, I keep hearing time and time and time again, people not really understanding zero trust. I only hear buzzwords, and I want more of the view. What are you hearing as you start talking to people, especially since you're an analyst?
Well, I think zero trust is one of those things where if you explain the very broad terms, if you paint it with a big wide brush, people get it. The idea that once you make it through that new perimeter, the service edge that SASE talks about, you don't have unfettered access to everything within the enterprise. You have to continually re-authenticate when you cross different critical boundaries, different service edges within the overall perimeter. That makes sense. The place where it breaks down is when they start talking about how to do this, especially, and let's be clear about this, how to do it without raising the transactional friction level for all of your employees. Because two things are critical for the C-suite. One is that every employee remain as productive as possible. And therefore, you want them to waste as little time as possible simply gaining access to the data and services that they need to do their jobs. The second is that risk be lowered by whatever is going on in security. And here's where we get into something that I like to call the friction delta or the friction differential, because you want to make sure that you have increased the friction for your threat actors. Ideally, you'd like to throw a wrench into their works completely, but you want to have it as low as possible for your legitimate users. And too many times when they hear zero trust and this notion of frequent or continuous re-authentication, all they hear is raising the friction level for their legitimate users. And we have to admit as well that if you in fact do that, if you do raise that friction level to a certain extent, our employees in enterprises have shown themselves remarkably creative and remarkably skilled at doing things to get around security infrastructure, whether it is going in and doing shadow IT and pulling data off onto completely unauthorized cloud services and applications, or simply finding, one of their, teenage child's friends who will come in and crack through the security on their behalf. So you don't want those things to be happening. And you want to be able to explain how you're going to keep it from happening in words that your accountants and marketing people can understand, because face it, they're the ones who tend to end up at the top of the C-suite. It's a tough thing, especially when, as Oliver pointed out, the meanings of the terms keep shifting on nearly a weekly basis. I have a lot of sympathy for the IT people, and especially for the cybersecurity folks in our enterprises. They don't have an easy job right now.
All right. I think I'm going to have Mr. Peabody here set the Wayback Machine back to 2005, when actually it's more like 2004, when Oliver and I were actually, having a cigar and drinking some single malt and talking about just what an identity management shootout should look like for InfoWorld. And basically, Oliver, being the curmudgeon, came up with When Harry Met Sally. The idea was Harry works at Fergenschmeyer Corporation and meets Sally during the merger talks, where Sally's company and Harry's company start merging. Well, the scenario is we needed to merge the two Active Directory domains. So the scenario was Harry meets Sally. Harry gets married to Sally. So you have to initiate through HR the change in records for Harry and Sally to be married and so forth. Well, we go along the line, and then Harry decides he's not getting paid enough and starts playing around with the back-end security, makes a duplicate administrator account to try and steal some money or whatever. Harry gets caught, so he gets fired. The scenario has HR and the security group dumping Harry and making sure all his accounts within the two corporations got removed. And then Sally decides that Harry's too much of an idiot. She's going to divorce him. So then HR has to go and back that out, and so forth and so on. That was the scenario that we used when we did the Identity Management Challenge at InfoWorld, where we had Kurian, IBM, Microsoft, Novell, Sun, and Thor Technologies all grew the same scenario, and we recorded that and figured out what's going on. Now, what I want to do is, Oliver was the one that came up with a lot of this. In fact, Oliver was the one that came up with Fergenschmeyer.com just to make it so that it was hard for us to say it. Oliver, what kinds of things were you thinking about as we were designing this?
Oh, well, as you stated, I was pretty drunk, so I'm not exactly sure. I think at the time that was 2004. That was for us really the beginnings of identity management, just the concepts. So what we were really trying to do was just make as confusing a path for various identity records as we could, and that was very directory dependent at that time, and it didn't hit a lot of the key features that we would worry about today. If you're asking, would Harry met Sally, would that scenario be as difficult now as it was then? I would say, yeah, probably. I think certain aspects have been smoothed over, but the cross-boundary thing, that's still going to be a major league hassle unless they're both AD, which admittedly most of the world is. But even then, putting two forests together, that's not a lightweight task, right? And tracking individual identities through those forests, nope, not easy either. And now you drop that whole zero trust balloon on it, and best of luck. That's me.
Well, Harry met Sally, and yes, we did have at the end of the scenario, Sally going back to her maiden name. But you know what? It sounds like we need to go and throw to yet another sponsor for This Week in Enterprise Technology. So why don't we just toss it to Mr. Lou?
Thank you, guys. I will get you back to your enterprise and IT news in just a moment. But before we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's IT Pro TV. Now, if you're already tuning into our show, you may have more than a passing interest in IT, but it's new to you, and you're not sure where to get started. Now, you don't have to worry about where to start because you can go straight to IT Pro TV. IT Pro TV has the knowledge and certificates that you need to break into the IT world while being desirable to future employers. Now, January's theme at IT Pro TV is all about getting started in IT. So you'll have a great start to the new year. Now, they have a free weekend from January 15th to the 16th. So if you just want to dip your toes into IT, the following courses will be free. A lot of great ones here. CompTIA, ITF Plus, and CompTIA A Plus. Linux Essentials, Microsoft 365 Fundamentals, the MS900, hands-on PC build from the bench, Cisco CCT routing and switching 100-490, and Apple certified support professional ACSP Mac OS 11. Now, if you're worried that learning IT can be boring, IT Pro TV is anything but boring. In fact, their enthusiastic edutainers make learning IT entertaining, interesting, and fun. And if you prefer short formats, courses are only 20 to 30 minute increments, just the right length for a short attention span. And if you have tight schedules, they have 7 studios and film Monday through Friday. They have the most up-to-date content with every skill. Now, their courses go from the studio to their course library in just 24 hours. And they make sure you're prepared for your exams with their virtual labs and practice tests. Now, IT Pro TV has wonderful monthly webinars as well. On January 13th, they'll be discussing Cloud Computing Confidential, secrets to leveraging the cloud in your organization. If you're looking to break into the world of IT, get the introduction you need with IT Pro TV. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise for an additional 30% off all your consumer subscriptions for the lifetime of your active subscription when you use code Enterprise30. That's itpro.tv/enterprise and use code Enterprise30 for an additional 30% off for the lifetime of your active subscription. IT Pro TV, build or expand your IT career and enjoy the journey. And we thank IT Pro TV for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Lou. Well, we are back to finish up this conversation that we've been having on identity and security. And I want to take a moment to ask a question of Brian, because, Brian has been involved in so many of these things. Brian, you helped design this long ago test, and you and I have had a chance to look at some of these technologies between then and now. As you look at the marketplace right now, and especially as you look at the needs of the enterprise in 2022, do you see something where there is a purely technology fix, or is this one where the enterprise needs to change the way it thinks about policies and procedures, needs to change the way it thinks about methods before it really starts implementing lots of new technology?
I think one of the big steps, because we're really talking about, mile markers. We're not at the end of our journey by any stretch of the imagination. There's products being billed as SASE. Cisco Umbrella happens to be one of the big ones. When you do a look for SASE, you're going to find Cisco Umbrella. Well, that's kind of cool, but we're not there yet. So some of the mile markers are going to be, our users are going to have to start getting realistic about passwords. Another mile marker is users are going to have to start getting used to multi-factor authentication. Well, we're not there yet. Now, in the previous recorded show, Leo was actually talking about going up in escalators at RSA, meeting this forlorn woman that was talking about this absolutely brand new technology from a company called Yubico. Well, MFA is finally starting to get to be standardized. Not quite there yet, but it's getting there. SASE right now is a silo technology. Everybody has their own solution and nothing so far cross communicates. Well, maybe they can. You're trying to go through an Active Directory or an LDAP server, but that's a really, really loose coupling. Will there be a standard someday? That's up to the market. You, the people, you, the viewers out there, you, the people that listen to TWiET, it's you voting with your money that's going to push a standard. That's the reality. And, we're going to be getting there. Something has to be done because we're in a hybrid environment or a multi-vendor cloud, and it needs to happen. It's just too cumbersome. Password vaults are now a must-have because, like, for instance, mine, I've got something like 3,000 different accounts now. And by going to a password vault, I now have random generated at least 20 character passwords because I really don't want the bad guys to have an easy way into my resources. The world, the users need to get used to doing things like that. And password reuse, I'm sorry. Slap yourself on the back of the head if you're reusing passwords. Anyway, Curt, that's kind of my soapbox on this topic. We're getting there. We're moving in baby steps, but we're not. I don't even see the end of the tunnel yet.
Oh, as long as that big light up ahead isn't a train, I think we'll call ourselves fortunate. But talking about things coming up, Oliver, I wanted to give you a chance to have what amounts to the last word on this particular conversation. As you look at the market and you've been seeing lots of things, are there any particular types of products that you hope will hit the market in 2022 that could bring some clarity and resolution to this promise that is, tantalizingly close and still apparently just beyond our reach?
In a word, no. So I don't think that is even the priority. Yes, the technology folks are certainly moving forward slowly, baby steps, as Brian put it. But I think the most important baby step, which is going to be a big step, is communication. From the C-suite down to the consumer, they don't understand what security means. They don't understand what, other than, hey, I got hacked. They don't have any clue how to protect themselves, why they want to protect themselves, what the different elements of that are. They don't know. So wrapping this information into some kind of, which is kind of on people like me, right? It really should be on the media, being able to explain this in such a way that we're not using polysyllabic words to explain what really should be very small words, and getting people used to things that are new to them and perhaps increase friction. I think that's the real first hurdle that we need to cross. I mean, I think I talked to this Andrew Shikiar, I think, from the FIDO Alliance a couple of months ago. That's a big, proponent of no passwords. They want to do passwordless stuff. And amazingly, when I'm talking to him, I find out most of the technology for that is already there. It's already in products. Microsoft already supports it all. However, when you ask people to use it, yeah, they're reusing passwords, but if you tell them you don't want them to use passwords, sales will go down. Why? Because they know passwords. That's something that they understand. We need to get zero trust and the underlying technologies to grow to that level of understanding, or at least a healthy percentage of it, and then the technology will move forward, probably largely based on market motion.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Whatever we see, it's going to ultimately be based on market motion. And as for me, I'm just looking for the opportunity to have yet another device implanted in my body so that I can walk in and be authenticated to everything all the time. Well, folks, you have spent another hour listening to the best show on enterprise technology, and we are grateful to you. I am also grateful to my two co-hosts. Want to get one last word from them, starting with Mr. Brian Chee. Brian, can you tell the listeners what you're going to be doing in the coming week and where they can find you?
I'm learning my new solar power system and batteries. I've got a whole heck of a lot of lithium-ion batteries from Tesla Corporation hung on the side of my house, and I need to go and learn how to get things to balance out so that as things like the sun goes away for a little while or it starts raining, I don't have to keep sipping from the power utility. I can actually just use it from my batteries and try and reduce my carbon footprint as much as possible. But anyway, if you want to hear what's going on with me and all the tinkering I'm doing, my Twitter address is ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab, and I'd love to hear from you. We have been getting a bunch of interesting subjects and topics suggested for future shows. That's all cool. You're also welcome to toss me an email. I am Cheebert, spelled CheeBert at twit.tv. And if you'd like to send an email to all the TWiET hosts, you can send it to TWiET at twit.tv. We'd love to hear from you. And yes, we've got lots of really interesting topics coming up. And we're going to start. I've got a few guests lined up. They're going to be talking about some emerging technologies that ought to be lots of fun.
Well, we love us some emerging technology. Speaking of emerging, we're hoping that Oliver Rist will be able to emerge from the snowbank sometime soon. Oliver, assuming you do get to come out of your basement, what's on tap for you in the coming week, and where can our listeners find you?
Well, I'm going to work on increasing my carbon footprint slightly by taking apart my snowblower and putting it back together such that it runs. But after that, yeah, as far as PC Mag goes, it's kind of my next big thing is sort of in the theme that we were just talking about. We're going to republish our and fully retested hosted endpoint security services, which includes bunch of underlying technologies that we've been talking about here. And spoiler alert, weirdly, not all of the contenders, even today, support EDR, which is, I'm going to be ranting about that for a little bit. But yes, you can find that on PCMag.com in the coming couple of weeks. And if you want to contact me or drop me some hate mail, all the Find Oliver information you need is on my bio page on that site.
Oliver, thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, a well-written Oliver Rist rant is a thing of beauty and well worth looking up and reading. Well, thank you for being here. You can find us every Friday live, or you can come and catch us wherever you find podcasts or at twit.tv. As for me, I'll be right back here next week alongside my co-host. We hope that you'll be able to join us. And remember, when it comes to knowing what's what in the world of enterprise technology, just keep quiet.
Hey, you don't have to wait till the weekend to get the tech news you need. Join Jason Howell and myself, Micah Sargent, for Tech News Weekly, where we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news.